everybody, and welcome to another video in my series where I listen to classic albums for the first time. And as you can see in this video, I'm exploring a bit of hip-hop with Public Enemy's It Takes a Nation of Millions to Hold Us Back. Yes, remembered that correctly. This was their second album, released in 1987, I think. Rolling Stone consider it the greatest hip-hop album of all time. It is currently number 15 in their rank of 500 greatest albums of all time, the highest placed hip-hop album in that list. In the previous incarnation of the list, it was the only hip-hop album in that list, although that has changed in the 2020 update. With regards to myself and this album and Public Enemy and hip-hop in general, I like rap. I like old school rap in particular. My sort of rap taste tends to cut off round about Eminem's third album. Sort of up to then, I like. After that, I find it all a bit samey. Particularly modern rap the last few years. It definitely does sound... I couldn't tell one act from another because they all sound exactly the same. To me, anyway. I don't own a lot of hip-hop and rap. A couple of Beastie Boys. And that's about it. A compilation. Yeah, that's really about it. You know, obviously, there's sort of rap inside more mainstream music that I own. Janelle Monáe features a lot of rap. I have all her stuff. And, you know, there's rap in Alicia Keys' work and Prince's work. And so I own those. But for dedicated rap albums, you could class Rage Against the Machine, I suppose, as well, as rap. But, yeah, for sort of mainstream hip-hop albums, Beastie Boys' License to Ill and their greatest hits, and that's about it, really. I think the problem is it's where to start with it, because I don't know much about the genre. Unless I hear something I particularly like, then I haven't got that impetus to explore, because I don't know if it's going to be something that I like. But yes, onto this particular album. So this is a new copy I bought from... I think it was recordstore.co.uk. We're talking more than 2 years ago now. This has been sat waiting for me to get to in this series. I think it was one of their deal of the days in the first lockdown. So I picked it up. It's one of the Back to Black releases on 180-gram heavyweight vinyl. Includes a download. So Public Enemy. I sort of know bits of some of their tracks. I couldn't tell you for certain that I've ever heard a full version of any of their songs. I may have, but certainly not to memory. But you know, what I've heard I like. It's obviously very political rap, definite message, and I believe with this album, Chuck D sort of wanted to make their version, the rap version of Marvin Gaye's What's Going On. So it'll be interesting, given that I've done that album in this series, sort of comparing that, but I believe that's largely due to the message rather than the actual music. But yeah, I'm looking forward to giving it a spin. I should imagine I'm not going to read along the lyrics, because I think that will distract from the listening experience. So on this first listen, I can't imagine that I'll be able to say too much about the actual subject matter, just what I can pick up here and there. But yeah, let's give it a spin, see what I think. Okay, so I'm not going to go through this track by track. There wasn't enough differentiation between the tracks for me to be able to say much about each individual track. But what did I think of this album? I didn't love it, to be honest. I didn't hate it either. I found it a bit repetitive. A lot of the tracks, the beats, just picked, basically a sample from a James Brown track, and then just repeated them ad infinitum, and some of them seem to just go on forever. A lot of the tracks had a high-pitched squeal on them that really started to irritate me as the tracks went on. The rapping is very attacking, very violent. There's very little switch in style. It's all very sort of one note, even though they got the two rappers, obviously with Chuck D and then Flavor Flav. Flavor Flav has his interjections on most of the Chuck D led tracks. But they are not enough to sort of lighten them. And then even the Flavor Flav led track, Cold Lamping with Flavor, his rap is very attacking on that. I thought that might be a bit more of a fun one, and it wasn't. The only sort of track that really stood out as being a bit different, and therefore a bit of a highlight for me, was She Watched Channel Zero. And that was largely because the backing on that was guitar based rather than drum based. It was sort of, a rock guitar sample being played throughout. So that made it a bit different. But even then, it started to get repetitive because it was just the same little loop played over and over and over. That said, I liked, although they were repetitive, they were funky beats. I was tapping my foot throughout. As suspected, a lot of the lyrics went over my head. I would need to sit down and either submerge myself in the album many times or read the lyrics over and over to really get the full benefit of what they were rapping about. A couple of tracks, it was a bit more obvious. Court Can We Get a Witness was about the court cases, about their use of sampling. That was sort of the main one that's leapt out as what they were rapping about. A lot of them obviously are about black culture, black oppression, all that sort of stuff that was very dominant back in 88, not 87, although it was recorded in 87, I believe, or at least some of it was. And still obviously relevant today. They had some really good samples sort of flitted throughout the album. There's a bit of Flash by Queen, a bit of Fashion, I think it was, by David Bowie, a couple of other tracks that I recognised. And a lot of the tracks sort of began with a sample that made you think the track was going to be different from all the others, but then they just went into the same James Brown beat, etc., as previously discussed. There's some live moments interspersed throughout the album. They didn't bother me. The only thing I would say was that on some of them, it was sort of a hard cut in between the live introduction and then the next track, rather than them trying to make it flow naturally. None of the actual tracks, I don't think, were actually recorded live. But they were just used between track banter and introductions and things like that in between the studio tracks. Certainly how it sounded. It didn't sound like any of the actual songs, if you like, were recorded live. Yeah, it's not, as I say, I didn't hate it. I will certainly listen to it again quite happily, but it didn't blow me away. I do fully realise I am not the target audience for this album. I'm a 47-year-old middle-class retail manager from the south of England. I cannot relate to the subject matter. And, at the time this was recorded, I was 12, 13 years old, and a lot of what was going on would have bypassed me by in Hampshire. It probably would have bypassed people in New Hampshire, let alone Hampshire. But yeah, so that's obviously a factor in my enjoyment for the album. Would I regard it as a classic? Not knowing much about hip-hop as an overall genre, certainly not having experienced much of the music, I wouldn't like to really say yay or nay. I wouldn't regard it, for me, as a classic album. I would certainly rather put on Licence to Ill by Beastie Boys than listen to this. But as I say, didn't hate it, but it didn't wow me. So yeah, that is my initial reaction to It Takes a Nation of Millions to Hold Us Back by Public Enemy. Okay, so yes, this series I listen to classic albums that I've never heard before and react to them. I need suggestions. To qualify, it must be an album that is widely regarded as a classic, that is on a classic albums list. Rolling Stone, 1001 Albums You Must Hear Before You Die, Q Magazine, Mojo, any, respected arbiter of what is a classic album. Whether, any of these lists really hold any value or not is another debate, but there's no point, just saying an album that's really obscure but you really like. That's not the point of this series. This is, these are albums that are widely regarded to be among the best ever recorded, and my opportunity to experience them and see if I agree. So you can comment down below, you can email me, you can tweet me, you can Instagram message me. Did I say email? I think I said email, but if not, you can email me. Everything's in the description box below. But that's the easiest thing, is just to comment down below. It might be that I know the album, in which case I'll say thank you. It's an album I know. It might be an album that's already been suggested. That's fine. Just makes me even more likely to pick it up. But yeah, thank you for watching. Like, comment and subscribe, and I'll see you in another video. Thanks. Bye.